Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. She left a pot of soup on the stove. That's how it began. The kind of soup she only made when she felt guilty. Tomato and basil. Her peace offering. I wasn't supposed to notice it simmering at 3:17 in the morning. But I did, because I was still awake. Still pretending to sleep beside an empty woman. I crept downstairs, not making a sound. The house smelled like crushed tomatoes and something sweeter. Maybe relief. Maybe lies. I opened the lid and found her wedding ring at the bottom of the pot. Just sitting there. No note. No explanation. Just stainless steel, floating like a drowned promise. She never planned to tell me anything. She assumed I'd find it in the morning, cry a little, then make coffee like always. But I stood there, staring at the ring in the soup like it was some sacred message. After 30 years of marriage, I was apparently worth one dramatic soup. I didn't ask questions. I didn't call her name. Instead, I opened her laptop. Yes, that laptop, the one she always shut when I walked by. No password. Just her email open, bold subject lines blinking like sirens. You made me feel alive again. Next time, leave the ring for real. He'll survive. Men always do. I scrolled for 10 minutes before closing the lid, trembling. I looked at the kitchen, spotless. Always spotless. But now it looked like a crime scene. I went back upstairs, laid down next to her as she slept like nothing was broken. I stared at the ceiling, and I made the decision. 30 years together, 30 seconds to end it. She'll wake up to an empty bed, a silent house, and my final message, not in words, but in absence. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid there listening to her breathe, peaceful, steady. Like the world hadn't just tilted off its axis. Like she hadn't just cooked her guilt and dropped our entire marriage into a pot of soup. At 6:04 a.m., I got out of bed, put on my work boots for the last time, and packed 3 things. My toothbrush, my father's old watch, and the letter I wrote months ago but never intended to send. I left the ring on the bathroom counter next to her mascara. I figured it deserved to be near something else fake. She didn't stir when the door clicked behind me. I took one last look at the house, our house, where we had slow dances in the kitchen, birthday banners taped to the cabinets, and the ugly green chair I always hated but never said a word about because she loved it. I stood there longer than I should have, hoping maybe she'd run down the stairs crying, screaming my name. But no, only silence. I didn't go to work. I drove. No GPS, no destination. I passed the diner where we met, the park bench where she told me she was pregnant with our first, the grocery store where we once slow danced in the frozen aisle because our song came on. I kept driving until all the landmarks felt like strangers, until my hands stopped shaking. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Not a call, just a text. From her. Did you go somewhere? No, where are you? No, I'm sorry. Just casual, like I had gone for milk. I stared at it. I could have responded. I could have said a million things. But I didn't. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. I realized in that moment, she hadn't lost me overnight. She had let go years ago, quietly, inch by inch. I was just the last to notice. And now it was my turn to vanish. She'd always said I'd never survive without her. That I was too soft, too dependent. Maybe she was right. But at least now, I'd be broken on my own terms. By the 3rd day, I was living in a roadside motel that smelled like mildew and lost dreams. The kind of place where the vending machine gives out warm soda and the walls are thin enough to hear someone sobbing through the night. Though, I'm still not sure if that someone wasn't me. I hadn't unpacked my bag. I didn't need to. It wasn't a new beginning, just a pause. A breath between the collapse and whatever came next. I didn't tell anyone. Not our kids. Not my brother. Not even my barber, and he knew more about my life than most people. I needed silence. I needed to figure out how 30 years of devotion, compromise, and loyalty could be boiled down to one midnight affair and a pot of guilt soup. The betrayal didn't even hurt the way I thought it would. It was dull, lingering, like a toothache you learn to live with because you're too scared of the dentist. On the 4th day, I finally turned my phone back on. 57 messages. All from her. Most of them started with, I don't know where you are, but, and ended with either apologies or justifications. One of them said, "It didn't mean anything." That one made me laugh out loud in that depressing motel room. Nothing screams it meant something like hiding it, writing emails about it, and tossing your ring into a pot of soup like it's a prop in some indie film. But one message stood out. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No name, just one sentence. "You deserved better." That's all. No punctuation. I must have read it 20 times. It rattled me. It made my fingers go cold. Was it from him? Was it some stranger who found out what she'd done? I didn't know, but I screenshotted it. Because for some twisted reason, it felt more sincere than anything she'd said in years. Later that night, I drove back to the neighborhood. Not to talk to her, just to see if the house still looked the same. It did. Lights on in the kitchen. Our dog, Pickle, waiting by the front door like he was expecting me to walk in and pour his dinner. I didn't go up to the porch. I stayed in the car with the engine running, like a getaway driver with no one to rescue. That's when the garage opened. And what I saw made my hands grip the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart again. The garage door lifted slowly, and I swear it felt like time itself was hesitating, stretching out those few seconds into a scene I couldn't look away from. My headlights were off, engine idling low, tucked just far enough behind the neighbor's hedge that she wouldn't notice me right away. She stepped into view wearing the hoodie I bought her for our 25th anniversary trip to Maine. The same one she claimed had mysteriously vanished in the laundry. It was draped over her like a lie that had somehow become comfortable. Then came the real gut punch. He walked out after her. Same guy from the car earlier in the week, younger, maybe early 40s, smug confidence oozing off him like cheap cologne. He was laughing. She touched his arm the way she used to touch mine when we were still in love, back when I believed her smiles were real. And there they stood, in our garage, in our home, as if nothing had shattered, as if I was the one who didn't exist. I should have driven away. That's what any sane person would have done. But I couldn't. I watched as she handed him something small, a key. He kissed her, not on the cheek this time, and she didn't flinch. She leaned into it like it was normal, like this new reality had already replaced the one we built for 3 decades. Then he stepped inside the house. My dog, my life. And she followed, never once looking back. That was the moment I realized she wasn't waiting for me to come home. She wasn't hoping for forgiveness or closure. She had already replaced me, not with rage or regret, but with comfort, like I had been a phase. A long chapter she was finally done editing. She had moved on so casually, so completely, that even my pain felt outdated. I drove away without headlights, feeling more invisible than ever. When I reached the motel, I didn't go inside. I sat in the car for hours, scrolling through every photo I had of us. Birthdays, vacations, hospital visits, random Tuesday dinners. In all of them, I saw a man who truly believed he was building something permanent. But the woman next to him? Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I made my first real decision since leaving. I wasn't just walking away. I was going to rewrite the ending. Not for her. For me. For the man in those photos who didn't deserve to be erased. I didn't go to a lawyer. I didn't call my kids. I didn't even pack up the rest of my things. What I did was something I never imagined I was capable of. I started collecting everything I was quietly erased from. I went to the bank first, sat down across from a woman named Denise who looked at me like I was on the verge of falling apart. She asked me if I was okay. I lied. I said I just needed to close a few things. I removed my name from our joint savings. I moved what was mine to a separate account. She hesitated, said, "Does your wife know?" I smiled. "She will." I stopped by our storage unit next, the one we rented for seasonal stuff. But really it was where all my favorite pieces of the past ended up. The old camping gear from before her migraines started. The vintage record player she said we didn't have room for. The dusty box of letters she used to write me before we got too busy to care. I loaded them into my trunk like stolen relics, like they still meant something even if they didn't belong to the present anymore. That night I drove 2 hours upstate to a cabin we once stayed in, back before we had kids. It was mostly abandoned now, more moss than structure. But the view was still the same, quiet hills, wide sky, no one asking where you've been. I lit a fire and pulled out one of the letters from the box. It was dated March 1998. Her handwriting was smaller then, more careful. She wrote about how safe she felt with me, how she couldn't imagine growing old with anyone else. I held that letter like it was written by a ghost. By the time the fire died, I had made peace with something. She didn't just fall out of love with me. She walked out of it slowly, deliberately, while pretending nothing had changed. And I let her. I enabled the silence, ignored the signs, thought loyalty meant waiting for her to come back to me emotionally. But she never planned to. Not really. And I finally stopped hoping she would. The next morning, I sent one text to our daughter who lived 3 states away. I told her I needed to visit. I didn't explain why. She replied in less than a minute. Of course, Dad. Come anytime. No questions. No hesitation. I felt a crack of light in that. Something unspoken but grounding. Maybe the version of me that wasn't broken still existed somewhere. I put the key to our house in an envelope and sealed it without a note. I wasn't giving up. I was just done being erased quietly. She wanted space. I give her miles. I didn't tell her I was coming. I didn't need to. When I knocked on my daughter Mallory's apartment door, she opened it with those wide, knowing eyes I'd seen 100 times when she was little and could sense I wasn't okay. She didn't ask a single question, just hugged me tighter than I thought I deserved. The moment I felt her arms around me, something cracked, not in a dramatic, cinematic way. More like a dam that had quietly been leaking finally gave out. I didn't cry loud. I just crumbled. She made tea. It was the same kind her mother used to drink when she was sick, lemon with honey. I hated that tea. Still do. But I drank it anyway. We sat on the couch, watching her cat try to murder a plant in the corner. And finally, I said it. She replaced me. Mallory didn't react with shock. She didn't gasp or fumble with her mug. She just whispered, "I know." That shattered me more than the betrayal. She told me she suspected something for months. Said Mom was distant, distracted, short-tempered. Said she noticed how conversations became surface level, how phone calls always ended just a little too soon. "But I didn't want to hurt you," she said, eyes filled with guilt. "You've always been the one who believed in her the most." And that was the cruelest part. She was right. I believed in Lynette through everything. Through miscarriages and hospital bills, through job losses and awkward holidays, through therapy sessions that ended in silence. I kept showing up. I kept thinking love meant being the last one standing when everything else gave way. But what do you do when the person you're standing for isn't even looking back? Later that night, Mallory handed me an old photo album I hadn't seen in years. It had a cracked leather cover and smelled like dust and regret. Inside were decades of birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings. There we were, me, her, and the woman I thought would always be mine. And in the photos, I noticed something subtle but painful. I was always reaching for Lynette, holding her hand, arm around her shoulders, leaning in. And she wasn't. She was smiling, sure, but she was always centered, alone in the frame even when I was right beside her. It hit me like a slow punch to the chest. I had been the only one trying to hold us together. And suddenly, leaving didn't feel like weakness anymore. Felt like truth. 3 days after I arrived at Mallory's, I finally turned my phone back on again. I wasn't curious, I was just ready. 51 unread messages, 8 voicemails, and a few missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were probably relatives. Maybe a few old friends Lynette had pulled into the drama. But none of that mattered. Only one voicemail caught my attention. It was her voice, trembling. "I don't know where you are. I can't sleep. The bed feels too big. Pickle won't stop waiting at the front door. Just, please come home. We can talk." I didn't expect things to happen this way. Didn't expect? Like it was an accident? Like she tripped and fell into someone else's arms over the course of a year? I deleted the message. No pause. No second listen. Because the truth is, I did expect this to happen. I just didn't want to believe I had already seen it unfolding piece by piece over the years. The intimacy that disappeared, the phone always flipped face down, the dinners that turned into silence-filled routines. I noticed all of it, but I buried those thoughts like they were shameful. Like my noticing was the real betrayal. Mallory walked in while I was staring at the blank screen of my phone. She didn't ask what I heard. Instead, she sat down and slid over a manila envelope. "Mom sent this," she said, hesitating. "Didn't open it. Thought you should." Inside was a letter, handwritten, 5 pages. Every word was a mess of apology, explanation, denial, then more apology. She called it an emotional accident, as if that were a real thing. She said she never stopped loving me, that I was always her constant. But she felt numb and lost and craved being seen again. That line stuck with me. She didn't say she wanted to feel loved. She said she wanted to feel seen. I don't even know what that means anymore. And right there, buried in the 3rd paragraph, was the sentence that made my blood run cold. He said he never wanted to replace you. He just gave me what you couldn't anymore. I folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it was made of glass. Then I burned it in Mallory's kitchen sink with the vent running and the window open. The flames danced quietly, no drama, no smoke show, just quiet release. Lynette had finally said the thing I was never brave enough to admit. I wasn't what she wanted anymore. And maybe I hadn't been for a long time. That night, I booked a one-way train ticket to the Pacific Northwest. No real plan, just distance. Not to run, but to restart. I left a note on Mallory's fridge, thanking her for reminding me that I wasn't invisible, that I still mattered to someone. And just before I went to sleep, I sent Lynette a single text. No anger, no venom, just this: "You were seen. I just wasn't what you were looking for." The train ride north was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand answers. Just long stretches of forest and coast, sunlight flickering through trees like the past trying to catch up. I didn't cry. I didn't stare out the window with tragic music in my ears. I just sat there, still breathing, and for the first time in years, without the weight of waiting for someone to choose me. I ended up in a town called Ellensby. You won't find it on many maps. There's a bookstore with a crooked sign, a bakery that opens before sunrise, and more dogs than people. I rented a small cabin that smelled like cedar and thyme. I bought a bike. I started walking more, reading more. I even joined a weekly trivia night at the local bar. I lost every time, but I was terrible in a way that made strangers laugh, and that felt good. It took months before I told anyone my story. I was no longer interested in telling it from a place of pain. Instead, I told it like a history book. Facts, events, turning points. What surprised me was that no one gasped. No one looked at me like a broken man. They just nodded, not out of pity, but recognition. Like they knew. Like they'd lived their own version. Mallory visits when she can. We hike. We talk. We laugh genuinely this time. One afternoon, she told me something that stuck. "You didn't lose her, Dad. You saved yourself." And she was right. Leaving wasn't an act of surrender. It was an act of reclaiming. I haven't spoken to Lynette since that final message. I don't need to. Some endings don't need closure. Some stories find peace in simply being over. But here's the truth no one tells you about heartbreak after decades. You don't start over. You start different. You learn to love your own company again. You stop asking why it ended and start asking what you want next. I may be a whiny old man who talks too much about the past, but I'm finally living in the present. And maybe that's the best ending I could have hoped for. Thanks for listening to my story. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. If you've made it this far, comment below. What's one historical moment, big or small, that changed the course of your life forever? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.